Hey guys, Matt here. This is my review of It Chapter 2. This movie is directed by Andy Muschietti, who previously directed Mama and It Chapter 1. This movie stars James McAvoy, Jessica Chastain, Isaiah Mustafa, Bill Hader, Jay Ryan, and James Ransone. It Chapter 2 finds the kids of the original film all grown up and moved out of the small town of Derry, except for one person. Mike Hanlon, played by Isaiah Mustafa, has stayed in Derry, and he starts to notice some strange and weird occurrences, so he must call back the losers 27 years later to return to this town to combat Pennywise the Dancing Clown and all the fears that come with him once again. When I heard they were doing It Chapter 2, I was mostly excited and a little hesitant. I was excited because we'd get Bill Skarsgård back as the creepy clown Pennywise, and I was excited to see what this new cast would bring to the table. How would they portray the older versions of the kids that we learned to love in the first film? I was a little hesitant, however, because I was afraid this film would suffer the same problems that I feel the miniseries from the 1990s did. So, I saw the movie, and even though I was right, the film was still enjoyable. Alright, so It Chapter 2. Let me start with the acting in this movie. There are probably two standouts in this film. The first one, obviously, Pennywise, played by Bill Skarsgård. He has now become one of those actors that has taken on a role and has made the role iconic. And I'm really glad that Bill Skarsgård has done that, because now we have two versions of Pennywise that are now iconic. We had Tim Curry's in the 1990s miniseries, and now we have Bill Skarsgård's. It's ironic because the only other role I can think of that we've had multiple versions of the same character that are now iconic is the Joker. Must be the clowns. The other standout in this movie is surprisingly not James McAvoy and not Jessica Chastain, but Bill Hader. Now, a lot of people have said Bill Hader is a standout in this film and he's the best part of it, and I would say yes. And it's not because this is like his first real dramatic movie role, and not because he cracks the best jokes, but because of his story arc. Something I really enjoyed about this film is Bill Hader shows funny comedic wit, but also he shows real emotion. There's a scene late in the film that got me real emotional. And it wasn't just, a tear trickling down your face. It was just bawling because of Bill Hader. But I also really like his performance in this film because, unlike the other kids and the other actors and the other characters, his character is really the only one with a story arc. When he's first reintroduced to the losers, he has one point of view, one perspective, but over the course of the film, after these events, after, this tragedy and these painful memories coming back, by the end of the film, he's changed for the better. Whereas the other characters simply just rediscover things they already knew, and it doesn't really change them. Yes, it makes them face their fears and overcome certain things, but they don't really change. It was just, oh, I remember this now, so now we're going to magnify it and work on that. Whereas Bill Hader as Richie, he learned something about himself and it changes him. And that was really brilliant on the part of Bill Hader. The rest of the cast were fine. I really liked James Ransone as Eddie. That casting is perfect. Not only because of the physical look of him as opposed to the kid from the first film, but to the mannerisms, the way he talks, the way he acts. Really good casting for all of the adults. Jessica Chastain as Beverly, she was really good. I kind of felt that her character and James McAvoy's character weren't really given a whole lot to do. And that's one of the downsides to the movie, is that the actors aren't given a whole lot to do aside from really just recreating events and moments and feelings that we felt for the kids in the first film. It was, okay, so Bill in the first film, had to get over the loss of his brother. So we're going to kind of rehash that. Beverly had to get over abuse in the first film. So we're going to rehash that. And I understand that the characters are remembering things from when they were children, but they should have taken these adults in kind of a new direction. We never got to figure out or get to know the adults. Now, and the movie really only focused on who they were as kids. So that kind of took away from the characters. Mike Hanlon is more the leader in this film this time around as opposed to Bill. Ben, who was the bigger kid in the first film, he's definitely slimmed up. There is a nice, sweet story arc between him and Beverly that I'm glad they wrapped up and closed off. And then you have the character of Stanley, which if you don't know what happened to him in the miniseries, I felt they handled that well. And I'm glad that that character served an important part of the story. He was not in the film a whole lot, but he was important. And there's a couple other things in the storyline that I felt they included that were from the book that they didn't need to put in the film. Because just because something's in a book or a novel that the film is based on doesn't mean you have to put it in the movie, because it doesn't always translate well. There's, for example, opening scene, or there's a scene involving another character that's brought back, and a couple other things that were never really wrapped up. It didn't really tie into the story, except for a purpose of going, oh, remember this from that? Okay, we're going to include it. And it really doesn't tie into the story, and it's really not that integral. Back to Pennywise for a second. Now that Pennywise is no longer scaring children, but now scaring adults, his scare tactics and his methods have shown that he's missed a step, or that he's out of touch. Because he's no longer scaring kids that he knew, so he doesn't really know what, makes the adults tick. So a lot of his scare tactics are just over the top. And he seems kind of desperate, because he should have been scaring them with no longer kiddie things, but now adult things, adult issues that really would have gotten under their skin, and not just, hey, remember when this used to scare you? Type stuff. Also, this film is very long. It's about 3 hours, and it's also about 30 to 40 minutes too long. What the film does is, it's really nice to see the losers as adults reunited. But there's a good chunk of the movie where they have to separate to find these personal items. And when they separate, we get individual flashbacks of Beverly and Ben and Eddie and Richie, where as they're finding their item, it flashes back to when they were a child being scared by Pennywise, which one, doesn't really make sense logically because you don't know when they occurred, but also Pennywise, again, uses the same things he scared them with before, and not something new. It's nice to see the kids again in this film, but because the kids are older in real life, some of them have been de-aged with CGI. Some of their voices have been dubbed over with ADR. And so, there's a running gag in the film that Bill, who's now become a writer, doesn't really know how to end his books or his movies, and it's a coincidence because that's what Stephen King, who makes a cameo in the film, had allegedly a problem with, is he doesn't know how to end his stories. And it takes me to the ending of It Chapter 2. The ending in this film isn't as strong as far as the defeat of Pennywise that was in the first film, because you're not rooting for these characters as much as you were the kids. But they do wrap things up nicely involving the individual story plots, and there's an emotional ending, and so that was nice. So, because seeing these adults cast as the older versions of the losers was nice to see, and it's an all-star cast, but there's an emotional disconnect as opposed to the first one. You were engaged, you were feeling for them, you rooted for them. It Chapter 2 is the weaker of the two movies. Also, the runtime doesn't help it at all. They should have cut that down significantly. But some shots were really well done in this film, including a scene in the library, a scene with Bill Hader inside a church, and a couple others. They were really well done, so I give Andy Muschietti credit for that. The acting was good, so this was a good 1 and 2 chapter story. So because of that, I'm going to give It Chapter 2 a C+. It had some highlights, but it was just way too long. So until next time, guys, see ya.